Got paper scraps, make bookmarks. Hey guys, it's Beth. Welcome. I'm still working on paper scraps. There are a lot. And so I thought today that we would focus on the different ways you can use your scraps to make bookmarks. So like this is 1,000,001 ways to make bookmarks using paper scraps, essentially. So I've used a variety of scraps, sizes, shapes, techniques, all kinds here in these bookmarks. So stay tuned for not a million, but a bunch of different ways to make bookmarks using the different scraps you might have in your stash. Do you save the backs to your paper pads just in case you ever need the chipboard for some reason? I know I do. And one way you can use them up is to use them to make bookmarks. So I have some scrap strip papers here, and I am going to simply glue the strip onto the paper pad, the backing to the paper pad. And it doesn't matter what size your strip is. You can be whatever, use whatever size you have. You don't even have to trim it down. I think generally I don't go any more than 6 inches long and 2 inches wide, but sometimes I do like shorter, fatter bookmarks. But again, it all depends on the scraps I have. So don't get caught up in the size of your scrap. Just make the bookmark. So I just take some wet glue, doesn't matter what kind of wet glue, and I'm going to just simply put it down on the busy side of my pad cover, and that way once I'm done, this white side will be the back side of my bookmark. So once I have the glue on and have the strip in place, I'm just going to burnish it down really well so that there's no glue bubbles. And then you just keep going. And I generally trim these on, I have a guillotine trimmer, and so I will generally trim them on that. Just one, it saves my trimmer blades a little bit more, my normal Fiskars trimmer blades a little bit more, since it's, you know, cutting through thin chipboard. But then two, sometimes depending on how thick the chipboard is, it's just easier and a cleaner cut on my guillotine trimmer. So I'm not necessarily worried about how straight I'm getting these laid down. I'm not worried about space in between, because I will generally just clean that up whenever I trim down the bookmarks. So I'm just going to fit as many on here as I can. So you can see I have different widths here and different lengths. It's just whatever the strip was. That's the nice thing about bookmarks. There's no set length, no set width. It's just a great way to use up your scraps. And if you make these, it's also a great way to use up those covers and backings to your paper pads. So I've got one more strip I had pulled out here, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on. I'm going to start another backer here. And again, I'm using the pattern side. You won't see any of this side when you're done. And then I tend to set them aside and let them dry for a little bit. And it also depends on the glue. I noticed that the Aleene's tacky glue takes a little bit longer to dry than, say, your Barely Art or your art glitter glue. And it doesn't matter what size of the pad covers you have. These were 6 by 6. This one was a 12 by 12 that I had already cut a piece off of. So it doesn't matter if you have a 12 by 12, you can do some longer strips. But a lot of times I have the shorter strips too, and so the 6x6 or a 6x8 or 8x8, whatever, will work just fine. So here's one that I have let dry, and you can see I have different size strips on here, and I put them on the cardboardy side so that the back side is the white and pretty side. And because my guillotine trimmer is a big one, I'm going to go ahead and take it over to my desk that I keep it on, and we'll trim these up, and I will be right back. Okay, so I have trimmed these down so that there is no cardboard left showing. You just have pattern on one side and white on another. And again, there are varied heights and widths, just whatever the scrap I had was, and then just, you know, trimming it down so that there's no cardboard showing on the front side. So now that I have my bookmarks cut, I am going to round the edges, and I'm just using a We Are Memory Keepers Crocodile. I'm using the 1/2 inch side, and I'm using this time instead of my normal old school Creative Memories corner rounder, because I'm also cutting through chipboard. This works so much better, but this one doesn't always give me a clean round on thinner projects, so I tend to save it for my thicker ones that the Creative Memories one won't do. And you don't have to round. If you have one of those tag top punches, you could do that too, you know, on the top part of it. I don't have one of those, but I know that kind of gives you a fun top scallop, plus it cuts a little slit that you could use to make your tassel. Because what I'm going to be doing next is I'm coming in with my We Are Memory Keepers hole punch, and I'm going to just come in at the top. I'm eyeballing. Don't really measure, I just kind of eyeball somewhere a little bit down, and then in the center width-wise. So now, if I wanted to, some of these are really pretty on their own, but if I wanted to, I could, okay. I had printed a bunch of these last year or the year before when I was making bookmarks. And I have some that say read more books and some that say live, love, read. These were printed from my silhouette. So if I wanted to decorate these up, I could. You could bring in shapes, glue on punches to them, and, you know, decorate them however you want. You can stamp a sentiment, you can stamp an image on there, but I have a bunch of these left, so I'm going to go ahead and use this on some of the ones that were maybe a little more plain. On most of the projects I've made so far, I said you could use wet glue or the red line tape. I would not recommend using the red line tape on this. You're going to go through a lot of tape, and that tape can be expensive. So like the score tape or the red line tape, depending on what you use, any kind of that double-sided super sticky tape, you would just be going through a lot of it. So wet glue is definitely more economical. There are tons of ways to do the tassels. This is just how I have found to do it. I tend to take whatever yarn I'm using, and I kind of guesstimate. I mean, if you want to go like pinky to thumb, that's generally probably about at least 6 inches. And then I just keep folding, and this is a thin yarn. I'm going to keep folding until I feel like I have enough, really. But I want to make sure that my 2 cut ends are on the same line. And because this is really thin yarn, I'm going to go one more. trim that off. So if you really want to know how much I used here on the super thin yarn, so there's 12, 24, 36, 48, so probably 50, 52 inches. Thicker yarn you could use way less, but I just want this to fill out a little bit. So then I'm going to take it, I'm going to find my two ends, match them up, and then fold my yarn in half. So now that I have, you know, one folded end and the two open ends, and then I'm going to fold it in half again, and you could keep going depending on how much you had. I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to take one end, doesn't really matter which end, either the all folded ends or the side with the open end, feed it through, and then kind of match everything up so that all of the folded ends and open ends kind of come together at the top. And then you want to find your two cut ends, bring them to the front, and then cross them over, essentially cross them over each other, because you want them to wrap around. This one's going to have to go around twice. You want them to wrap around the whole bottom part of your tassel there. So you can either wrap them around to the back or wrap them all the way around back to the front, depending on how long it is, and then tie a knot. And then there's your tassel. And then you trim it up. I usually go to wherever like the shortest fold is and cut. And super simple. So this is one way to do bookmarks with strips. And I have a few more ideas on how to do bookmarks with your paper scrap strips. If you don't have the backs to your paper pads, or let's say you have one that's plain white on both sides, you could use that for this project as well. But I always have strips of heavy-duty cardstock left. So this is like 120 pound. And whenever I make my mini slimline card bases, there's always like this, at least one strip left, because the mini slimlines don't use the whole pad, the paper cleanly like, you know, the A2 size do. So something else you can do is use the heavy duty cardstock scrap. So my strip of white cardstock is just a hair over 2 inches. So I'm going to come about 1/8 of an inch in and see if that gives me what I want. Yes. So, because what I'm looking for on this one is I'm not trying to cover the whole front like I did on this one since it had pattern on it. I want to leave a little bit of the white edging. So now that I have it sized widthwise, I'm going to come lengthwise. So in this case, I also want to round my edges. Now that my edges are rounded, I'm going to come in with my glue again. And even though the Creative Memories corner rounder didn't really like doing the heavy duty cardstock, I went ahead and used it just so that my rounded edges would be the same rounding. You know, like sometimes if you use 2 different corner rounders, you're going to end up with like a different shape of the rounding, whatever. So again, I glue my pattern paper strip onto my heavy duty cardstock strip. And it's, I guess, personal choice. You could use regular cardstock as well. I just like a nice sturdy bookmark so that it doesn't get all bent up. And And again, I'm going to bring my hole punch, my We Are Memory Keepers hole punch, the crocodile. And I'm going to come down a little bit and punch my hole. You could decorate it if you want to, but I like this pretty pattern. I think it's really pretty and springy. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to come in with my yarn again, and there's really no science to, I just keep winding until I'm happy. And I'm really trying to use up the super thin yarn, so. Again, thread one end through, find my, cut edges. There's one, there's one, and I'm going to wrap them around my yarn bunch here, just to make sure that they all stay together at the base. And ta-da, super simple. Okay, yet another way to do bookmarks using paper strips. Let's say you don't want to glue, or you don't have anything heavy enough that you want to glue your pattern paper to, or let's say you have double-sided paper and you want to showcase both sides of the strips. If you have a laminator, there's another way you can make the bookmarks, and these are really easy too. This one I'm going to trim down. It's got a little bit of a white edge on it. Again, I don't necessarily care so much about what size the bookmarks are. Just trying to use up my strips. And if you don't have a laminator, maybe like you can also use the, what is it, this non-heat lamination, the self-lamination sheets, or if you could probably do it with contact paper. If you can find clear contact paper, you might be able to do it there as well. Just know that if you're going to use the two sticky sides of the contact paper, like take one sheet with the sticky side up, put your bookmarks down, you're not going to be able to move them again once you do that. And then you put the other side of the sticky side of another sheet of contact paper as well, and then you can trim them down. So I do have a laminator, and I'm just using, this is just a standard, I think the actual size is like 9 by 11 something sheet of lamination, and I'm just spacing out my bookmarks, and I think this one could use a little something. Maybe we'll put the Live, Love, Read on the green side. And there we go. I tend to not round the edges when I laminate, just because you would have to round the edges before you laminate it, and then come back in and round them again at, once of the laminate part. So I tend to not really worry about it too much, but let's use a variety here. So this one is like wider and shorter, but I like the pattern. You just want to make sure that you leave enough space between your strips so that you can come back in and trim later on, and fit as many on there as you can so that you're not wasting the laminate sheets. And so I will just kind of fill up a bunch of sheets at once, and then run them through and that uses up a whole bunch of strips, and then that way I'm not wasting my laminate sheets. So I will run these through my laminator, and I run them through twice. So I run them through once, I flip it over, and then I run them through the other side just to make sure that it's nice and sealed. So okay, I have ran these through the laminator, and now I'm going to trim them down. You can use a paper trimmer for this. I'm not going to, because the laminate kind of makes my blade not last quite as long. Sometimes, like, I have an old paper trimmer that I will sometimes use, but I also have just cut them out by hand before. Because usually you can go right along the edge. You want to leave, like, there's a natural pocket that the lamination makes, and so you want to make sure you leave that pocket, because if you cut into that, then the laminate pieces might come apart. But really, it's just as simple as trimming those down. And then once they are trimmed, I come back in with my crocodile, punch my hole, and then I'm not going to use white ribbon on this one, or white yarn on this one. I'd rather use a better color. I would just make my tassel again and finish off the bookmarks that way. Okay, so for this particular bookmark, it can be a bookmark, a page marker, a journal embellishment, but it's just hidden paper clips. And there are probably a billion ways that you can do these. There's all kinds of different ideas all over YouTube, and I'm not really sure. I've watched a bunch of them, and I'm not really sure where I saw this particular idea, but I really liked it because the paper clip was completely hidden and you didn't have to make any slits or cuts anywhere. So I have just pulled out some scraps that I thought would work. I tend to cut mine down to about 5 inches, like whatever my base scrap piece is, and then whatever the top layer covering the paper clip is, I usually go about half an inch shorter, and then also just kind of make sure that it's not going to cover up whatever paper I'm using on that bottom layer. So I do them differently depending on what I'm using. Let me say that. For this particular round, I am using pattern paper for the base layer that's going to essentially hold the paper clip. So let's go ahead and we'll fold this in half. So whatever size you make, you can make them whatever size you want, like 3x6, 2x5, whatever. But you would fold it in half and you put the paper clip over. You want something fairly thick to go over the top of your paper clip, just so you don't see all the ridges if you're doing them this way. That's the one downside to doing them this way. And I would really like to find a thinner paper clip if I can. I've been trying to find paper clips at Dollar Tree that aren't like these coated ones. I mean, they're really pretty if you want to have them showing, but if you want them to hide, I would much rather have like the plain ones that are a little bit thinner. So anyway, I'm going to see if this will work. So you've got your base layer folded in half and your paper clip on top. Whatever you're going to use to cover the paper clip, you're going to fold that in half as well. And I want to make sure it's long enough. Okay, it is. You'll fold that in half as well. And then you can do whatever you want with the edges. Sometimes I will just round the corners on both. On this particular one, I rounded the corners of my base layer and then did a fishtail on it. This one, I like rounded the corners on both layers. So totally up to you. You could fishtail both. So I will make sure that that is long enough. And you can use the big paper clips. Sometimes I use the small paper clips. It all just depends on what the size of my scraps are. So then to hold mine down, I suppose you could use score tape if you wanted. That might help, I guess, disguise the shape of the paper clip a little bit. You could use any type of wet glue. I'm using the Barely Arts glue because it's what's on my table. You could use the Aleene's tacky glue. I've not used hot glue before, but that might be an option as well, I guess, depending on what type of paper you're using. So I will show you this again on the other side, how I glued it, but I do like to glue one side at a time, just so it has time to kind of set up before I'm pulling on it to do the back side, if that makes any sense. And then I will normally kind of let this sit with something heavy on it and give that a second before I do the other side. So we're going to come and we're going to do my next one. So again, I have a scrap. I think this one is a little bit less than 5. And then I just cut my top layer to be a little smaller, and it looks like it does need to be evened out. There's an uneven edge there. So I'm going to fold both pieces in half. And then just for quickness, I'm going to go ahead and round all of my edges. I do. It's a really old one, but no one's going to see it. Make sure that that is going to cover. Okay. So when I'm gluing my paper clips, gluing the layers together, I usually add glue to the top of the paper clip and kind of on the inside and right around it. And then I come to my top layer paper and I'm going to add glue around the edges on the paper. And that way it will have glue right on the paper clip, so that should adhere to my top layer paper. And then I also have some glue around the edges so that it will stay down and lay flat. And then I'm burnishing. And then again, I will let that sit for a minute. So now I'm going to come back and do the back side, and I'm going to do it the same way. Burnish it down a little bit, and then I will let that sit. So while that's sitting for a second, I wanted to, I don't know if you can see, so this brown cardstock was not as thick as I thought, and so you can, I don't know, really see the outline of the paper clip on there, and it kind of like, it's just very distinctive. I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but so I came in on this one to decorate. I came in with just whatever scrap I had left of that polka dot paper and added it on top before adding my little simple embellishment of a star, just to help kind of camouflage that paper clip. This one, the cream cardstock was a little thicker, so you can see it on the back side, but on the front side it glued down so that you can't see the paper clip at all. And again, these simply slide right over the top of a page. So again, you can use it as bookmark. It can be a decoration in a journal. But it's just a great way to use scraps. So as far as decorating them, I like to use something flat just because my intention is a bookmark. If you're using it for maybe a journal embellishment or a page embellishment or something, you could probably go a little bit more dimensional. So on this one, I just layered up some flowers and added a little vinyl circle in the center. And like I said, that one I just used a star. So for the two that I'm doing today, I'm going to figure out which side looks the best. I kind of like that side. And I just pulled out, again, some flowers, some punched flowers from my stash. And I am just going to layer those up. I was just kind of looking for a combination of light and dark pink, so the flowers don't necessarily layer perfectly, but that's okay, because we are using up scraps and punches that I already had punched in my scraps in my stash from previous scraps. So again, I just added a little vinyl circle. I had cut out of scrap vinyl for my flower center, and then we'll just add that right on front there. Okay, and so these are the hidden paperclip bookmarks. Another way to use paper clips as bookmarkers is to take the paper clip, and you can put like a little pennant banner decoration on the bottom of the paper clip, and then it will slide onto the side of a page this way. And again, there's other ways you can decorate these or put these together. This is just kind of how I have done mine. And I generally use these for journal embellishments more so than bookmarks, but I think they would work as bookmarks as well. And it's sometimes they're also a page marker in a journal or a planner, and not just like a decoration. So for this particular one, this has like red, yellow, and black X's and O's on it. So I just found a red star that was already punched in my stash, along with a black circle already punched in my stash, and we are just going to add that on there, and we'll let that sit. And then I will show you how I made that first one. So I have a piece of paper, it doesn't matter the length. This happens to be about 3.5 inches long, and it's 1.5 inches wide, and that is based off the length of the solid side of the paper clip. So again, you fold it in half, and you can do whatever you want with the edges or with the bottom. You can round the corners, you can do a decorative edge punch. I'm just going to fishtail mine for right now. And so again, you're going to find that long solid side of the paper clip, and I'm going to slide this in there, and you want to make sure that the two rounded ends are facing this way, or I guess whichever way. That's what's going to slide on your page. So whatever direction this is facing is going to be how your paper clip will go on. So keep that in mind when you're determining the front and back. So to glue these on, again, you could probably use score tape or any type of wet glue. I just glue right there around the edge of the paper clip, around the side on the paper clip, and then I do around the outside edge of my paper, and I make sure that it's all the way down, and then just burnish that. And then to decorate this one, I again went to my punched flower stash, found a couple of flowers color that has similar colors, and we're just going to glue those right on top. And this one, you can even use smaller scraps than you did with the first version, like the hidden paper clips. And then I'm going to add another one of my little scrap vinyl circles as the center of my flower. And that's how quick they go together. Very quick, very easy. All right, so this is a no glue bookmark, and it is a corner bookmark, and you don't have to cut. So there's a couple different variations of corner bookmarks that I make, and this is one that doesn't require any cutting, which is nice because then it doesn't generate any other scraps. This one, there's no glue, no cutting, and no scraps. The only cutting you have to do is you need to make sure that you have a square piece of paper. And it doesn't matter what size the square is, just as long as it's square. So this one I believe is 3 3/4, and this one is about 4 1/4. I think this little guy was 3 1/2 or 3 3/4 to start with. You don't have to have double-sided paper. It just might give it some more interest if you have double-sided paper. But I will say the thicker the paper, the harder this one is to do because of the folding. So we'll start with the sunflower one. You're going to take your square and you're going to fold, doesn't matter which corner, one corner to one corner. And so then you have like a little triangle. So from here, you will turn it and you're going to take one of your like bottom sides and you're going to fold it so that the point hits that top corner. And you're going to do that on both of them. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you kind of a center point here at the top of your bookmark. And I really should have done this going the other way so you can see the full sunflower on the back side, because this is going to be my bookmark. So once you have your center point up here, you're going to take what was your top. Now you've turned it down to the bottom. You're going to take it up to the top. And just so that you're going to fold it so that the point touches the very top center of your bookmark there. And then you are going to fold this one down to cover up the center. And you're going to fold this one down so you're covering up the center, just so you don't have any white showing, and then you tuck it under. And this is where it gets harder the thicker your paper, so we'll see how that works here in a minute with my double-sided paper. And then I just like to burnish all of the folds really well. And then this slides right over the top corner of a page. So here we're going to do it again with the double-sided. So again, this is thicker. I'm going to go ahead and use my bone folder as I go. Now I have my center point. We're going to fold that up. And then we want to see, since this is thicker, I'm not going to worry about the point there in the center. I'm just going to go ahead and fold this one under. So you're going to see a little bit of the white on this one, and I'm okay with that. So then I'm just taking my bone folder kind of on the inside of my pocket there to burnish the inside down, and then coming along the outside. And there we go. So this is like considered like an origami fold because there's no cutting, no gluing, it's just paper folding. So there you go. Now you have bookmarks and you have no additional scraps created. That's a win for me. However, if you don't mind the scraps and you don't want to have to mess with folding, maybe your paper is thicker, you can do this version where you are going to cut. And this one, again, you start with a square, it doesn't matter the size. I just went with whatever square, what size I could get out of this pattern. And so it's 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. This time, instead of folding it diagonal, you're going to fold it in half one way and in half another way. And so now you have 4 squares on your paper. You're going to cut 1 whole square away, and I like to go like just on the outside of my score mark. So you'll cut 1 whole square away, and I did not do a good job of cutting this one. And then you're going to come over here to the opposite side of the square you just cut away, and you're going to cut this square at a diagonal. So you're going to cut a square and a triangle. That's why I said this one kind of has weird scraps. But now, essentially, you have the same shape and you're going to have a pocket, but now you have to glue. So I usually kind of figure out which way it's going to fold best. Sometimes, depending on how I cut, one way does look better than the other. This time it doesn't really matter. And then you just come in and glue on the flap that you're going to fold over. Burnish it down. And now you have another corner bookmark. So that's just another version, but again, this one does give you some scraps. Okay, so maybe you don't have a lot of pattern paper scraps, maybe you have a lot of cardstock scraps. I know some of you have mentioned that you actually have more cardstock scraps than pattern paper. You could still make bookmarks. Take some of those cardstock scraps that you have. This one happens to be 2 1/8 inch wide, and I cut it down to 6 inches. And you can then take, these were already pre-punched and in my stash. I'm gonna go ahead and punch my hole first. But these hearts were already pre-punched and in my stash. If you don't already have some punched, you can use some of your other cardstock scraps that might not be big enough for bookmarks, and to punch out some shapes, and that'll help use up your cardstock, and then you can use those punches on your bookmark to decorate it. Or if you don't want to take the time to do that, you can stamp directly on your bookmark. You can, stamp an image, stamp words, use rub-on stickers, whatever. Just take that cardstock strip and decorate it up, and then you have a bookmark made from cardstock instead of with the focus being on pattern paper. And maybe you do have pattern paper, but maybe it's all in these little strips, the tear strips at the bottom of the page, the branding strips, whatever. Or maybe you have just little bitty bits and pieces and scraps. Take them, glue them to cardstock, to chipboard, whatever you have. Like here, I've made the strip cards before, where I lay them out and I glue them on to cardstock, and then it just kind of make a card mat out of them. So you can do the same thing, covering either a larger piece of cardstock, or in this case, like I said, it's just another piece of chipboard. Line your strips up. I'm going to have to fix the adhesive on here, make sure it goes all the way down. Line your strips up, glue them on, and then once you get it filled, you can trim it down and then come in and cut, individual strips out for bookmarks and finish them off the same way. Or if you have little bitty bits and pieces, just kind of glue them on in a random pattern and all over your cardstock sheet, and then come back in and trim them up. And this idea was actually inspired by Natalie Daniels, who is a member of my Crafting with Bourbon Creek Facebook group. And that is what she did on these particular bookmarks. She went through, just adhered a whole bunch of scraps in a random pattern onto a sheet of cardstock, turned the cardstock over, and then cut out strips for bookmarks. So there are 1,000,001 ways that you can make bookmarks using your paper scraps, regardless of the materials that you have. I'm sure you can find some way to make a bookmark. So I hope you guys enjoyed all the different ways we made bookmarks today, and that you found some way that you can utilize your scraps to make a bookmark. So if you did find a way to use some of your scraps, let me know in the description box or in the comment box below what style of the bookmark you think you can use, you can make the most of with your scraps or styles. Or even if you don't have scraps, like which bookmark was your favorite? Which one would you like to try at some point? So we have made all of these bookmarks. Some of them I ended up making and finishing up off camera after we had kind of put them together. Like this one, I had laid it out. I actually put it together off camera. So we have all these bookmarks. You've made the bookmarks. Now what do you do with them? You can gift them. You can use them yourself if you're an avid reader. Some people sell them. Depending on how fancy they are, you could, create a little bundle of bookmarks and sell them, whether you sell at local fairs or markets or online or just through Facebook, whatever. You could also bundle some up and gift them to friends, and you can donate them. There are a lot of places that look for bookmarks. Cards for Soldiers accepts bookmarks. I know our local library takes bookmarks because during summer reading programs, they hand bookmarks out as prizes to kids who, meet their reading goals. In my Crafting with Bourbon Creek Facebook group that I have, there are people who make bookmarks and donate them to the little local libraries, the boxes that might be around your town that look like the little houses that people have built, like a birdhouse or whatever, and you open it up and there's books inside. You can donate bookmarks to that. I've donated bookmarks when my girls went to public school. I donated bookmarks to the library at their school because, again, that was something that they handed out occasionally as prizes. So yes, there are a lot of different places that accept bookmarks as donation, and you may know of more. And if you do know of some more donation options that I didn't mention here, please leave those in the comments so that myself and others can know about those. But there's tons of options of things you can do with the bookmarks that you make. And again, you're making these bookmarks using up your scraps so things aren't going to waste, and you can use those scraps for good. So again, I hope you got something out of all of this that you can use. I know I got a bunch of bookmarks that I can donate. Ellie has already laid claim to this one. Some of these corner ones and paperclip ones I do use to package up when I have an order from our online store, I will use one of these, the paperclip ones or the corner bookmark ones, to hold the paperwork together within the order. The rest of these I will probably be donating to Cards for Soldiers because I have a box that's going to be going to them real soon. So I thank you guys for your time today, for sticking with me through all these bookmarks, and I hope you can whip out those scraps and make some bookmarks, and I hope that you all have a very crafty day.